Everyone, I'm Megan. I'm the Assistant Director for Experiential Programs at Iowa State University Papa John Center for Entrepreneurship. And we are the group that's hosting the sessions for the Start Something series. And this year, we partnered with the Ivy College of Business here at Iowa State to feature some of our great faculty members within the entrepreneurship program and learn more about their research and how we as entrepreneurs can apply those learnings into our businesses and our endeavors in the future. So this is our second to last session. We have one more next week about the first 100 days of being an entrepreneur and what entrepreneur personalities and new ventures might play a role into that. So if you are interested, please tune in for that as well. And but today we have a great conversation with Ileana and Elizabeth. So I will pass it over to you two to introduce yourselves. And like I shared, if you all have questions or interactions, please include those in the chat and I will help keep an eye on those. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you,
Well,
Meg.
thank you. Okay, Ileana, you can start.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm super happy to be here with you all. I want to start by saying thank you to Megan, Jean, and all staff in Papa John Center for Entrepreneurship. I really appreciate from the faculty sign-up point perspective, we really, really value all the work you do. And we appreciate that you combine our research and provide advice to entrepreneurs, real life entrepreneurs. So thank you for this. And second of all, I want to say thank you, Elizabeth, for being willing to share with us great inspirational stories that you have and your knowledge. To introduce myself, I'm Ileana Maldonado. I'm faculty assistant professor at Ivy School of Business. I myself was an entrepreneur as well. For different life turns in my journey, I decided to go to academia. And right now I'm doing some research at the intersection of, we call it stakeholder theory, but it is how to create value for not just owners, but how to create value for people that have a stake at the organization, but within this very highly uncertain environment, which is entrepreneurship. I have done some research on also on political ideology and cognitive factors and biases and heuristics that affect decision-making or influence decision-making. So I'm happy to be here. And before we jump into introduction of Elizabeth, I just want to highlight some of the great accomplishment and why I'm so honored to have Elizabeth here and why I'm super excited to have her here. Elizabeth has a very inspirational story, personal story, which really influenced her decision to become an entrepreneur CEO. She's a speaker, contributor, author, and CEO of Metaphrases, Language and Cultural Solutions, LLC. And she has around 20 years of experience in the industry of language services. And of course, she has earned and has attracted national attention and has been the recipient of several awards, really truly amazing awards, like Crane Business Notable Entrepreneur 2020. She had Negocios Naus Latinas in Business Award 2017. We also have her as named Chicago Business Journal Women of Influence in 2016. She received also the National Association of Women Business Owners and Women Business Owner of the Year 2015. And she had the Small Business Administration Small Business Person of the Year Award 2014 and some other awards that she had. So it is truly amazing how accomplished you are, Elizabeth, but I think we want to learn more from you. So if you can introduce yourself with this.
My background. Well, well, thank you for the introduction, Ileana. Sometimes I hear my bio and all the awards that I receive, and it makes me very honored to be in a place where I've been acknowledged for the work that I do. So hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm really excited to be here with you. My name is Elizabeth Colon, like Ileana had mentioned, and I own a company for 17 years called Metamorphosis Language and Cultural Solutions. It is a passion of mine, and I say passion because I grew up in a home with parents who didn't speak any English. And so as a child, not only myself, but my siblings, we often were taking them or accompanying them to various types of appointments. And that sort of really was not a place for a child to be at the time. While we should have been in school, we were playing the role of an adult interpreter. But as I continue to grow up in this environment, I also have two sisters who are from the deaf community. And so when I would look at them and see how they were at a disadvantage in school or just even trying to make friends, it was really painful to see two of my siblings without the ability to connect with people on a human level. And that prompted me to really look into this industry as I became a young professional to see where I can make a difference. And finding that interpreting and language in general, being a translator as well, is really a profession. And oftentimes, if you're bilingual and you grow up in a home that's bilingual, you are often just put into those places without having any formal experience. And what we don't realize from that is that we are at a disadvantage. Like what we're doing as a favor, as the kindness of our heart is really as a disadvantage to the person who's actually using our services. So I wanted to make sure and to ensure here in Chicago or nationally that if I had someone who needed an interpreter, that they would be qualified interpreters. And so that's how my business was born 17 years ago. I started it with $500, the only $500 that I had of my savings account at the time. And I worked from home and I had a little computer and a phone in my kitchen. I mean, that's really the way I started my career in this industry of interpreting. And I wore a lot of hats. I was a single mother at the time, and I grew up with a mother who was a single mother of 6 kids. And so she instilled a lot of ethical values that really helped shape the entrepreneur that I became today.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's truly, truly amazing
Thank you.
have accomplished. And I think this journey that you just went through needed to have some degree of courage, right?
Yes.
And I'm sure you had to go through some times of self-doubt and some moments on how do I make decisions, because it's to highlight how complex is entrepreneurial environment, because you don't know, really you have to put together, right, different pieces of this giant puzzle where
Yes.
you have to enroll different stakeholders and then enroll those stakeholders, convince them that this opportunity is worth pursuing. And then you have to make several types of decisions in order to accomplish your goal. So I want to share with the audience and with you what we have been finding in the literature, and just very briefly what we know about how entrepreneurs think and why they think differently, more especially different than managers. And then if you allow us, I want to use and ask you how that really applied to you. So I only have two slides.
Absolutely.
Really briefly summarize what literature have found, but I think it's more, it's going to be way more appealing to hear your example, combine that with what you have experienced. So in general terms, when we say that entrepreneurs think differently, is that we tend to compare entrepreneurs with managers or with any other individual. So just want to give some specific definition or clarify some terms about who is an entrepreneur. The entrepreneur is the one that initiates, organizes, and owns a business, right? It's a natural leader. It has to be a leader that put all the pieces of the puzzle together to identify an opportunity and make these opportunities sustainable. And then we have managers, right? That they coordinate and they oversee the management of an established firm. In the management or in this context, managers are more accustomed to specific routines and activities, and they are more comfortable with those. Whereas entrepreneurs, they have to create those routines and activities. They have to create a culture. They have to create everything from scratch. And so in the literature, we started, like in the 90s, we started asking ourselves, what's unique about entrepreneurs? And what researchers started looking at was, well, maybe there's a difference in terms of personality traits. Maybe entrepreneurs have these specific qualities that makes them different. Some people have even suggested that there might be a gene, an entrepreneurial gene, that some people are more predisposed to entrepreneurship instead of traditional jobs. But at some point in the literature, these type of studies were not making great progress until one scholar, his last name is Busenist, he was working on his dissertation and said, well, maybe it's not about the traits. Maybe it's about how entrepreneurs think in comparison with managers. And so he at this point, he's retiring and had a very successful career about this only question about how entrepreneurs think differently, how we can compare entrepreneurs with others managers. And he suggested, and then other scholars as well, suggested that there had to be some shortcomings or some form of mental models that were like a rule of thumb that kind of simplifies strategies to make decisions in very complex and uncertain environments. So what we have found in our literature is that entrepreneurs tend to use some decisions based on biases and heuristics, maybe really knowing that there's a bias and maybe not even knowing that there's a bias. And one example of those biases is overconfidence. In the literature, we know that entrepreneurs compared to managers are more confident, like 3 times more confident than general managers. And it makes sense. You need to have some form of passion and you need to be confident that it's going to work in order to enroll other stakeholders. And there are other types of biases and heuristics that can be formed while you're growing up. Maybe your experience as an entrepreneur while you were growing up impacted your mental model and how you see the world and how you think the world should work. And that really stays with you until you're until later in life, and you make decisions based on what you saw. And this resonates what you explained at the beginning. You had experience with your sisters and your parents, and maybe you're making decisions also based on that experience. And there are other forms of biases and heuristics. We can say, and I have explored this idea of political ideology as a form of bias, and we have found that yes, there's some tendency of aligning values and beliefs from investors and entrepreneurs or other stakeholders. We can see also religious ideology as some form of a mechanism or shortcoming to enroll different stakeholders. And then finally, I want to just touch base in these 3 different methods of thinking. Traditionally, when we want to accomplish one project, we think about the goal, the end goal, and then we try to go ahead and identify the elements that we need to accomplish that goal. What we have found is that entrepreneurs don't actually use this mental model, which is called causation. What entrepreneurs tend to do is that they see what they have at hand, what is available, and then they provide a solution from what they have at hand. And with your experience, we'll see if that really was what happened with you. And we call that effectuation. They use what they have available and then create a solution. And then we have this other method of thinking, which is called bricolage. And this applies for conditions where there's extreme resource constraint, and entrepreneurs use whatever is available to provide a solution as well. So don't want to spend more time here on what literature says, but I want to go ahead and start asking you, Elizabeth, since you're here, and it's a privilege to having you here, to ask you. So really going a little deeper on your story and your background, what motivated you to change or go from a position as a member of an organization and then create your own opportunity? What really make you think about that?
Well, it started with the story that I shared in the beginning of my parents and my sisters. But furthermore, what I found in working in healthcare was a lot of like health disparities that many families were facing that did not speak English. And as I was working in healthcare, actually my career path was nursing. I was actually a nursing student. And that's what I started to be. And then I became an entrepreneur. However, but prior to that, I worked at an organization that there was no more room for me to grow. And I was stuck in a place where there were no other opportunities for me. But while I was there, I was also I was a nonprofit, but I was creating things and services and programs that felt like I was an entrepreneur.
Okay.
And I had a mindset of in the nonprofit world of we need to treat this nonprofit as a business and not as an organization that relies on grant funding. And that what spurred my interest in this area of being an entrepreneur. And so just kind of observing that and being there for so many years and then attending nursing school at the same time, because that's how it all kind of fell together. And seeing what I was seeing, I always felt like I could solve the problem better than other people can, right? And so that prompted me to want to further research the industry. I didn't know anything about it at the time. I knew that I served as an interpreter, and when you're not formally trained or have the skill sets behind you, you're considered an ad hoc interpreter. And so that's what I was doing. I was serving as an ad hoc interpreter and always questioned, there has to be a better way of doing this. This is a profession. And so when I found it, I went and I studied and became a medical interpreter myself. And then I became certified as a trainer because I wanted to bring it back and teach bilingual individuals who truly had an interest in being a professional interpreter, how to do it the right way. And so that's how I went from like going from A to B, is kind of seeing a problem, right? And seeing how I could address that, because there's always a pain point, right? I think a lot of entrepreneurs start businesses because they want to solve a problem and there's a pain point that they've encountered. And that was my pain point. I wanted every individual, regardless if they went to a hospital or if they went to the bank or they went to school to talk to the parents, that if they didn't speak the language, that they had an opportunity to be able to communicate in a language that they understood, although they couldn't speak it, but that they understood by having a qualified interpreter next to them.
Yes, I hear that. I'm hearing how you really identify an opportunity by solving, right, by solving a problem. So did you notice a change on your mindset from when you were working on your organization or as an employee, and then when you started doing your own business?
Oh, absolutely. When you're an employee, you can count on your paycheck being there every 2 weeks, right? When you change into becoming an entrepreneur, you're relying on yourself for that payment. And then, so your mindset immediately has to shift to having to work longer hours. So that doesn't become an 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 job anymore, at least initially, right? When we look at entrepreneurs and you see somebody who's a business owner, you think lucrative, you think successful. What people don't see is really what goes on behind the scenes to make us successful. And so you have to shift your mind. You have to be able and willing to put in the long hours to make things work. You have to be willing to learn many things. If you don't have the capital to hire employees, you have to do everything yourself. And in my case, I started out with a phone and a computer. The external world did not know that I was a one-man show. And so when people would call my office, I would change my voice to sound like an assistant answering a phone call, and then putting that call on her hold and coming back and answering as I was the CEO. And so that required 16-hour days for me, because I wasn't only the CEO, I was the scheduling person, I was business development, I was the accountant, I was everything, right? And I had to learn how to take risks. If you don't know how to take risks, and if you fear that, it's really hard to be a successful entrepreneur, because every day you question, am I doing the right thing? Right? Am I doing the right thing? Because if you don't have the money like I didn't, $500 is really nothing. I until this day, I'm not sure how I actually did it, that I was able to successfully grow a business that we're in business for 17 years with the limited resources that I had. I didn't have mentors. I didn't even think about that. And I didn't have capital. And so I, had to be overly confident and go to the 1-2 clients that I had and ask them to pay me with less than 30 days, more like 2 weeks, in order to build my capital to continue to put it back into the business. So that mindset of being an 8-to-5 employee, somewhat being laid back, right? Because I had a big corporation backing me up, to becoming a solo entrepreneur and having to take risks in many aspects of life. And being willing to kind of dig deep and work 16 hours and wear multiple hats and make decisions that I wasn't even sure if they were the right decisions to make at the time. And I'm not here to say that I had all the answers, because I didn't. I made a lot of mistakes too along the way. But we have to, you have to be strong-willed and like the slide that you showed, like, be overly confident about the decisions that you're making, to be able to know that you're going to succeed in it.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm hearing there were challenges, right? And you were able to overcome those challenges. Definitely, you had this visionary thinking about what was going to look like this organization. How you imagine that? You really had to imagine and convince others that how this was going to look. And definitely, you convinced your clients. I don't know if you had at some point investors, but you had to enroll and convince other people. But what I'm curious about learning, what was, besides being really confident, what was the root, what was the thing that when you were self-doubting yourself, like in maybe responding to someone by email, what made you think, what was that positive seed in your mind that would allow you to accomplish your short-term goal? What was that, Elizabeth? What were you thinking about?
Yeah, when there were many challenges that I faced, I think, and I'll touch back on one thing about challenges, being a woman and an entrepreneur is really, really hard. You are judged very often and questioned for the products and services that you bring to the table. And even so, to the point where the value that you truly bring to the clients is questioned. And so oftentimes you're often asked to reduce your prices, right? And the expectation is that we say yes because we want the business. And for me, what I've learned is that if I had a business that had value or gives value to an organization or a corporation, right? They're calling me because they need my services and I'm bringing value to them. Then my mindset around that is that if my prices are $100, let's say, for example, and they're saying it's too much, then they don't value my business, because I'm solving a problem for them. So in my mind, what I think of is that you need me more than I need you, right? And that made me stronger over time, because I won't lie that there were times, because I wanted the business, that I lowered my prices, because I wanted the name behind, the name recognition of that organization on my website, or to be able to say to someone, oh, I'm going to throw out like a Walmart, but I don't work with them, like a Walmart, right? You want that name recognition. But what we fail at is that the more we lower the prices, the less chances we have to succeed. right? If you can't increase your revenue and your gross profit because you're lowering your prices over time, you won't be in business for a very long time. And so for me, that was sort of like some of the things that I had to learn and overcome. And I say this to all the entrepreneurs. If you have value in what you're offering, and that's the value you maintain all the time. And you're going to always be fronted with challenges, people from procurement, people who are going to want you to, push you against a corner to lower your prices, but you have to stay strong in position to say, this is the value I bring to you. And therefore, maybe I'm just not the right partner for you.
I'm hearing you were clear on what was the customer paying.
Yes. It took me a little bit, but yes.
Okay. And how you were creating value for them.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's really, really clear. And I think it's great advice for students and entrepreneurs that are in this journey, right? I think we have a question right here on our chat from Lancet. Says, how did you manage to get outside financing to expand the business?
That's very sort of difficult because it's going to sound like cliche that I was able to expand my business financially. I never borrowed money. Excuse me. And I didn't have capital. So when I say to you that I started my business with $500, that's truly what I started with. And because I didn't have the capital, but I had the couple clients that I did, I went back and I asked them to pay me within 2 to 3 weeks, and they did. And because I was a solo entrepreneur, that money was what built up my capital. And that's how I was able to grow the business and then hire people. So I think I was one of the lucky ones, because not every client of yours is going to pay you in 2 weeks because they like you, right? And so that was a risk for me to take. And when I asked them for that, but for a lot of individuals who are thinking about starting the business, what I've heard from them is a little bit sort of like mine. We use our personal savings account to start our business, because initially you're not going to get a loan from a bank. The investors, you have to really convince them that you are going to be profitable, because they're going to want their money back, right, at a higher interest rate. And so a lot of us tend to get a line of equity in our homes. We borrow from family and friends, or we dip into our own personal savings account. But like I mentioned, I was one of the lucky ones that for some reason I was able to do it without any of that.
Yeah, I love your answer and how you're describing how was the process. In business school sometimes, and this has been one spot or one opportunity to improve, but we have been focusing so much attention on how to raise capital. But your example is great, and it really illustrates how entrepreneurs face two decisions: the decision of the financing decision and the investment decision, like how to raise more capital or how to create more revenue, right?
Right.
And from finance literature, we know that the decision about how to raise more money, it's how to have more revenue is more important than how to raise more capital.
Yes, I agree.
You did that, and your example really, really shows us how sales are important, even more so than convincing investors, right?
Yes. And once you have all those sales and you're able to show your P&L and your balance sheet to a bank or to investors, that actually gives you the opportunities to get the money that you need eventually, right? The capital. I mean, by me doing that, I was able to purchase my office space. So I have a loft office space that I purchased 3 years after I started my business, because I was able to have the sales that I needed and have a very nice gross profit margin or net in my P&L, but my bank account actually, I spoke to it as well.
Since we're in this discussion about finance and how to increase profits, do you have a specific approach about how to take risks? Or how do you decide when it's too risky or not too risky? We have this myth that entrepreneurs are risk lovers,
Yes,
We tend
we
to
are.
not the case sometimes if they are moderate risk takers, but
Yeah.
how would you describe it?
I agree, entrepreneurs are risk takers because I don't believe that any of us would be here if we weren't willing to take that risk. I was an entrepreneur that was very reactive to risk taking because I love the thrill of it, right? If I'm like, oh, this is an opportunity, I'm going to do it, I'm going to figure it out later. Not always a good idea because we don't know the outcome of all of those. And so when situations arise within my company, I always based it on very reactive risk-taking decision making, and that could be very dangerous. It wasn't always the outcome I was looking for, but I will say that I think with failure comes lessons and opportunities. And through those lessons of being very reactive to being a risk taker because I wanted to venture out and do something new, or it sounded exciting at the moment within my own company, I learned to take a step back and pause. And you can still be that risk taker, but you have to analyze what's in front of you. And you have to ask yourself those questions. Is this a right fit for the company? What is my return of investment if I get into this, right? And if you can get the answers that you need, then it's okay to then proceed with it. So I find myself now waiting at least 24 hours to 48 hours before I make those kinds of decisions, because I can't afford to lose money anymore. And I've lost a lot of it, as I explained earlier about being a risk taker and just jumping into things. I need to make sure that my company can be around for the next 10 years. And so I really analyze everything and I ask myself those questions. What is it in for us? What's our return of investment? Does it align with my values of my business? It's something else that I've learned over time. I choose to want to only work with people that have the same values that my business bring to the table. So those are the things that I think about. So we have to be really careful with that because we can lose our business in the middle of that too.
I love what you're saying. I really love it. We have been discussing with students how important are values and how different modes of cooperations are really aligning values of the company with values of customers and other stakeholders can pay off and create value for not just the owner, but
Yeah, if I can share something on value, if I can elaborate a little bit more, and you may have a question similar to this, answer it. So when COVID hit, COVID hit, impacted a lot of businesses, and we are a multi-million-dollar company, and we were expected to hit a certain revenue that year, and then COVID hit, and everything went away. Like for many other companies, within 24 hours, we had to shut everything down. And in the midst of all of that, there were things that I'd learned and things that I felt that I realized that I really wanted to work with people who had certain values. And at the time, there was a client that was just basically my highest paying client who became very difficult during COVID. They were they weren't sympathetic. They weren't kind. There was just really too much to handle at the time, considering everything we were going through. We were still in shutdown. And I decided that I was not going to work with them anymore. And through them is where I learned about the people that I want to work with, or the organizations I better serve work with. And I reached out to my lawyer and I asked him to cancel my contract with them within 2 weeks. And it was a big shocker because they were the ones that were keeping my doors open during that time. And we managed. I mean, we figured it out. I figured it out because I became a solo entrepreneur again. But I want to share that because sometimes we hold on to customers that, you cringe when the phone rings and you see their number on the caller ID, or they send you an email, or you speak to them and you're just like, oh, I don't want to deal with them anymore. Just remember, those are not the people that you want to work with.
It's a great example, and I'm so glad to hear. Just on Tuesday, we were discussing with students how really having a strong ethical position within the organization can pay off in the long run. I mean, sometimes we think about about what's going to be the consequence, right? But we need to think also about this contrast, short-term versus long-term vision.
Yeah.
And in the theory that I work on, theoretically, people that align or treat fairly to all the stakeholders, those companies can stay and be sustainable for the long run. But those companies that do not really follow their values or do not lead by example, those companies at some point in time will fail. So your example is just wonderful. So with this segue, I want to ask you, how do you balance this short-term versus long-term vision of your company? And what's the role of your ethics on the decision making? Do you use ethics to make decisions? And I love your examples, but do you have other example or a clear standpoint on that?
Yeah. You know, I want to say I'm a person of integrity. And for me, that carries a lot of weight in the work that we do. You know, I hold my employees accountable. I hold my independent contractors, who are my interpreters, accountable. I have a high level of respect for people, human beings in general, regardless, right? And I do bring that into the environment, because what I do is not confined to Chicago. What I do is it's open to the world. I work with all different industries, but the people that come to work for me are from all around the country. You know, we have interpreters from Africa, we have people from Russia, we have, Latin America. And so we have to have a certain level of levels and ethics to be able to work around individuals like that, because we all come in with different cultures and different beliefs and different understandings of how we see our Western society, like our society and in general. But when it comes to short and long-term goals, I really look at, is that short-term goal going to take me longer than something I want to accomplish in the long term that's going to take me the same amount of time, but will take me further, if that makes sense, right? So when I look at opportunities for me or for the company, I look at the short-term goal. Is it really suitable for us, and how much time are we going to invest in doing this? And a great example is like proposals or RFP that we're often given or asked to fill out for the government, right? And sometimes they're 6 months. They're very short-term just projects that we have to work on. Well, what is the amount of investment that we're putting into it to make it happen? And if it's really not worth our time, then that short-term goal is out the window, because we don't have the resources as like we used to be able to invest in all these short-term goals. There are other ways of looking at short-term goals. Like, for example, currently I'm doing consulting work. And this is a project that I've taken on, and my short-term goal by taking this project is that every invoice that we invoice them for is going to go to a specific goal, right? And right now is all those invoices that we charge, we take that money and we pay off the loan that we got when COVID hit. That's my short-term goal. This is a 6-month project, and my goal is to pay off that loan so that we don't have that loan anymore. And based on the calculations that I made of our consulting fees and the amount of work I'm doing with them, that pays itself off. So that's a short-term goal for us. Long-term goal right now for me is really looking at how I can grow our revenue back to what it was pre-COVID, to put it in a position to either sell or to sell it to an investor or sell it to an employee when I decide to step down or cut back on the hours or not the hours, but the amount of time I want to work within my company.
Thank you, Elizabeth. We have a question from the audience from Akash, our friend Akash. He's asking us, what's your perspective on any entrepreneurial traits that you think an entrepreneur should possess?
I believe, being an entrepreneur, I think anyone could be an entrepreneur. I mean, we have introverts, we have extroverts, we have confident people, we have people who kind of are not so confident, they work at a slower pace. I just believe that depending on the industry that you're getting into, the personality traits fits in each of them, right? The one thing when it comes to personality traits that I have found is relevant is really going back to that. Are you willing, does your personality fear or not fear risk? I think risk is, the biggest area for entrepreneurs. The confidence thing is really important. Like, are you confident enough to be able to speak to other people? Can you show up and speak and sell your product and services without second guessing yourself? I think that's an area, my son is an introvert and we always have conversations and he's like, well, I'm an introvert. That's his excuse all the time, right? On things that we talk about. But some of the most successful entrepreneurs are introverts. And it's really about how you leverage your own personality when you're owning a business. And if I look at accountants are more behind the scene people, so they are very successful. They know their numbers, but their personality traits are completely different than me, who I'm front facing, building relationships on a single day, every single day, right? I think IT is another great example of individuals who are probably more introverted, who likes to be behind the scene, who are very successful in developing software programs, web designs, websites, and things like that, but they don't have the personality to want to talk to people. So it's a little bit kind of challenging how to answer, because I think every individual out there, personality is needed to one extent or another, right? I don't have an accounting clerk and I'm doing accounting and I don't like it. I mean, if anybody's an accountant out there, why? Because I'm behind the scenes looking at number. That's not where I want to be. I want to be out there networking and talking to people because I'm a relationship person. So I hope that answers your question. I think there's opportunity for everyone.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I don't want to miss the chance to ask you, since you're a super successful woman, and I know you have a family, how do you navigate competing responsibilities? How do you do that? So many hats, as you mentioned.
Yeah. It's never easy. Everyone talks about balance, priorities. I'm fortunate enough that I'm actually an empty nester this past year, but prior to that, when I did have my children at home, there were times like I had to work long hours. So when I started, I had to put in those hours because you're going to put in those hours regardless. You have to put in because you have to stabilize your business. But over time, if you learn how to put your policies and procedures in place, documentation is really important. Because a lot of entrepreneurs, we have it up here. But when we start hiring employees, we still have it here. We're not transferring it to paper. And so if you don't transfer your policies, your procedures, your ideas, your vision to your employees, then there's never going to be a way where you can, I'm going to use the word balance, right? Like, how do you prioritize having family and having a business? So when I learned to put all my practices and my policies and procedures in writing, and then I hired my employees, they had a document to go to when I wasn't available, right? And furthermore, regardless of whatever position you have within my company, you have to learn everybody else's job. And the reason why I have everybody learn everybody else's job is not because I'm going to pay them more because now they're multitaskers or anything like that, or that I'm going to have them do somebody's job. But if Elizabeth gets sick tomorrow, somebody should be able to step in. And if Ileana is out tomorrow, somebody should be able to step in to do your work. And that way we all kind of teamwork together and then we help each other out. When I did all of that, that was the first time I was able to take a 3-week vacation. And trust me, I was nervous because I didn't know what to expect. But when I came back, there were no problems because I had a document that they were able to reference and they knew how to back each other up because I had trained them in everything that I did. And so we all know each other's job. And that's how I was able to balance it and say, wow, now I can work in an 8 to 5, right? And go home to my family. And so that's the way it's been for me. So I'm not going to say that I don't work long hours sometimes because it requires me from time to time to do that. But I have the privilege now of having employees who understand, who have bought into my vision. I like to hire staff that think entrepreneur so they can understand that we're not a corporate 500 company and we'll never be able to compete with them. But when you work for a smaller entrepreneur, this is the way it looks for you. And this is how we work within a group together. And so entrepreneurship, people say freedom, right? Oh, I created a business because I wanted the freedom to do what I want. It's not that way. It really isn't. I am one. I haven't broken out of this habit yet, but I feel guilty taking off a half a day. I still do, and I know that I earned that right because I've done this for 17 years and I put everything into place. But there's a big part of me that still feels guilty for kind of walking away to, enjoy an afternoon with my husband or something.
So besides feeling guilty, something that is very typical for female entrepreneurs.
Yes.
Did you also have fear of failure in some areas of your life? And how do you navigate fear of failure?
Many times, actually. COVID was a great example of it. My husband said, "Are you going to close your business? You have no business." And I was scared. I felt a sense of failure because I felt like I was going to fail after so many years of being in business. Not that it was anything that I did, but it was something that I couldn't control, right? It was a situation that the whole United States or whole country was shifting into something that we didn't know, and we had to adapt to the new reality. And that first week alone, I literally kind of just laid in bed, feeling that sense of like failure. I'm going to fail. This is not going to work. I'm not going to have a business. Oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to go back to the workplace. I have no money to pay my mortgage. So all these thoughts crossed my head of like, what am I going to do next? My husband's a retired school principal, so he doesn't necessarily work. So I consider myself the main breadwinner in our family. And I had to then sit back. I think I had to soak it up first, right? Like give myself that little pity party that we call when you're like thinking you're going to fail at something. And then I laid and I sat there and I said, okay, Elizabeth, what can you do different at this time before you actually lose your business? And I remembered, that when I opened my business in 2007, I was working by myself. Nobody was with me, right? I could have failed back then. We know statistics shows that was like a high percentage of businesses fail the first 2 years, right? I'm year 13. I haven't failed yet. So let me just figure this out. And I went back to day one. I told my husband, I'm going to treat this business as if I just opened it, and I'm going to restructure the entire company. And I spent my entire couple months, reevaluating how I ran my business, and I changed things around. And that was kind of one of the ways I overcame that sense of failure of like, how can I take this failure or feeling of failure and turn it into lessons of opportunity? Sort of what I mentioned earlier. Like, what are the lessons and the opportunities that you can take away with when you failed, even when you fail, or you sense that, that's in the direction that you're going? Because I think through every bad mistake we make, or every sense of failure or obstacle or challenge, if you sat down and you wrote down the opportunities that came out of that, you would have a long list. And that long list turns into lessons that you won't repeat later on.
So do you think maybe you are in a different position now because you had a team, right? And in some ways you were able to delegate, you knew how to delegate, and they learned from your manuals, or they knew how you would make decisions, right? Also, like
they knew how to make, well, the manual didn't tell them how to make the decision. They told them the steps of how to do things, right? One thing I didn't mention, I'm glad you made that comment. I empower my employees to be leaders. And I tell them, we're all going to make mistakes because I make them too. And so when you make that mistake, let's also learn from that. And so there were many times where there were mistakes made that didn't really make me happy, Ileana, but because I was trying to teach them to be leaders, right? If you empower your employees to be leaders, if you allow them to think as entrepreneurs, they will give you more than what you think, you know? And so when those mistakes happened, maybe I wasn't happy, so I would step away and I would soak it in and come back, and I would meet with them and say, what did you learn from this? And how would you do it differently next time? And that mistake wouldn't happen again because they took ownership of identifying the problem themselves and then correcting it. And if it's a solution that they gave me that was different than mine, but I liked it, I'm like, run with it and use it that way. And we would then all implement it, right? Because what is in these documents, my policies and procedures and practices, is what I created. But as the years go by, you're going to find employees who are going to be creative in a way that they're going to bring value to your business. And so that policy and procedure that you may have created may change as a result of that one employee that's going to give you a great idea.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Considering that you're super busy and we want to take advantage of this time, I think we have one question from the audience, and I have also one question prepared for you. From the audience, they're asking, Blancet is asking, what channels do you use to recruit your business?
What channels do I use?
At the end, but go ahead, you want to answer that.
Fortunately for us, 95% of our business comes from referrals. And so I'm going to say this, that's my recruiting method. And if you're considering doing a business, remember that your clients are relationships, right? It's not there. You don't go to them to sell, you go to build relationships. I never walk in trying to sell my product. I always go in building a relationship. And what I mean by that is I don't jump into, oh, this is what we do and this is why you should buy me. I learned and I get to know that person first. And sometimes I don't get the business right away, but I get it 6 months later. And they remember me because there's something that I say or do that they always come back and they say, I remembered you because you did this, okay? Otherwise, if it's not the referrals, I love LinkedIn. I really love LinkedIn. It's really the professional platform to use when you're out there doing your business and creating it. And I've slipped in this, but you know, if you can put yourself out in LinkedIn as an expert in the industry, putting little posts around your business, people would then start following that and you start connecting with them. And then when they do reach out, again, do not jump in right away with your business and asking them for business. Try to build a relationship like, hey, Elizabeth, you know, thanks for connecting with me. I see that we have this person in common, or you live in California. I love California. Little things like that will build relationships where they'll keep coming back to you. And then eventually I ask for a coffee chat, you know, a little Zoom coffee chat. And then I get to know that person. But that's really, I don't put a lot of money into marketing because if you do a good job in your business and you add value to your client, they're going to refer you.
Thank you for this comment, Elizabeth. It really makes me happy. I have on my research, the unit of analysis that I'm using or we use is relationships. We see business as a sum of different relationships and how to build to really have bonding and reciprocity on these relationships. And that really helps to create value for all stakeholders. So I have this last question. Since it's 12:56, if you could offer some advice to fellow entrepreneurs, but particularly if you could have a specific advice for women entrepreneurs on how to leverage their thinking as a source of competitive advantage, what would that be? What advice would you offer?
Women are very nurturing and very strong women. We're strong. When I look at my husband and when the way he thinks and the way I think, there's so much more that I can do compared to him, right? And it's because I'm very strong. So for women, especially if you're mother, and if you're not, I think we have this nurturing ability to be able to solve problems and to do multiple things at the same time, because that's just our nature. That's just our nature. And what I'm finding more, and I'm loving about women entrepreneurs and women professional in general, is the way we're showing up as leaders. And I think that all starts with just being a female, right? We've learned to be more empathetic. we've learned to be more nurturing, and we've learned to want to be able to share more of ourselves with our employees because we want them to grow professionally, or we want them the same opportunities that we have. And so for us, I think that if you just kind of bring that together and never like second question yourself when you have to be firm about something. Sometimes, I pull up the chair to the table. I don't wait to get invited anymore, right? I just pull up the chair. Why? Because I have a lot to contribute. And so I'm not afraid of doing that anymore. And so when we should not shy away from those opportunities. And so because we have so much, and I think that the way we think now is really changing the landscape of the entrepreneur world and the business world in general. So we just, we have to go full-fledged with it. Just go full-fledged with it. I think a lot of that is, I could be very caring, but I could be very hard. It's a combination of both things, but I do it in a sweet way. I do it in a sweet way. And if I can I just quickly answer this question about the resources for small businesses? I mean, the employees, I think this is really key too. I love this question because when I interview people, I let them know that I cannot offer you what a 500, Fortune 500 company is going to offer you. And so when you come into this small business world, it's a different dynamic, and you have to find the right person that loves to be around smaller teams. That's first of all. My way of compensating my employees, rewarding them, is first, I do trust them a lot. And so I have a hybrid model. They can come into the office when they want, or they can work from home. They don't have to tell me. They just got to do their work. I offer a lot of flexibility. These are very common things that we hear. I offer them flexibility. Whenever they want to take time off, they want to go to lunch with their husband, they don't even have to ask me permission. What they have to do is get coverage. They have to go to the other employee and say, can you cover me for 2 hours while I do this? And if they can, that's perfectly fine. So there are very little things. I find thank you cards powerful. Employees like to get acknowledged. Handwritten cards are key. I put in sometimes, I have one employee who loves Starbucks. She goes every day. So I give her a little Starbucks card. A lot of them just want affirmation. So at the end of the day, when we're signing off, I'll say, Alexis, thank you for doing such a great job today. I'll see you tomorrow. I really appreciate you. And that brings so much value, and it's not costing you anything.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. It really shows how building relationships and building trust and bonding pays off in the run.
Absolutely.
I think we ran out of time. I wish we had more time.
Me too.
Because it's just inspiring, and all this knowledge you share with us, it's value. It's super appreciated. Thank you again.
Thank you. No, thank you for the opportunity. And for those of you who attended today, thank you so much. I hope you took away a little nugget here and there, and wish you all the best of luck in your businesses. And for those who are thinking about it, go for it.
Thank you so much, Megan. Thank you, Jean, and all the audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.